So this is going to sound like the dumbest intro I've ever done, but I just got finished watching what I honestly think is probably the best YouTube video I've watched all year. But that's not saying much considering how crap the average video on YouTube is these days. But it was called something like Why There'll Never Be a Show Like SpongeBob Again. And there's two types of people who will be listening to this. There'll be people like me who have watched SpongeBob in the past, and then there'll be people like you who have not watched SpongeBob in the past. Am I right?
Yeah.
So, to the people who have, you know what I'm talking about, right? People who grew up in the 2000s. There was a show called SpongeBob. We all watched it in English-speaking countries, anyway. And it's a classic. It was funny, but it had this weird thing where your parents at the time would also want to watch it as well. Unlike every other show, because most cartoons were were stupid, right? Let's face it, they were dumb because they're designed for young people. But SpongeBob was one of a weird show where even my mother was like, you know what, this is actually quite funny, and they enjoyed watching it with me. Now, as soon as any other show would come on, they'd be out of the room, right? But SpongeBob was weirdly special. It appealed to all audiences, and it's very odd to think a cartoon of all things could actually do that. And years later, or decades later now, SpongeBob still actually lives on. I mean, I've referenced it a lot of times. I mean, it's still around. It's in people's heads. People always remember it. Sure, they might not watch it, right? Because that'd be a bit strange. But we all remember it, and we all remember it well. Why is that the case? Because there's a lot of cartoons. There's a lot of things that we all saw back then. But SpongeBob is the only one that is kind of like immortal. It still lives on. I mean, I have a cousin now, and they know what SpongeBob is, and it's been 20 years, right? They still watch it, they still get it. Like, why is this show still around, and why is it seemingly immortal? The point of it was that there's two main characters in there, and I say this to the people who haven't watched this show. This is not about SpongeBob. Bear with me here. There's a bigger, greater point to be had. Two main characters of the show, SpongeBob and Squidward, and SpongeBob is like this happy, kind of like ADHD autist who's happy and optimistic about everything, And SpongeBob represents kind of like what we are when we're young, right? Like we don't know about, I don't know, we don't have any nihilistic instincts or depression or responsibilities or anything like that. Everything's a wonder. We're always wandering around and, learning about things, and everything's interesting, right? And that's kind of like what SpongeBob is. But on the other side of the coin, Squidward is kind of like us now, like when we're older, when we're in our 20s and 30s and whatnot. He's sort of like this depressive character who, he kind of feels like he's not getting where he wants to be in life. He feels hard done by. But the point is that SpongeBob and Squidward have the same life, the same lives, basically. It's just their perception of how they view those lives and treat their lives is different. And it got me thinking, like, wow, that is actually a really good point. I hate to sound like I'm making something deep out of fucking SpongeBob SquarePants, but it's true. I never thought of it that way. And it made me think about my own life. And it made me go, I've realised that in the last few years or so, ever since I've been 20 pretty much, I've looked back, not to the future, or like optimistically, but to the past, nostalgically, for joy. I mean, I have a series called Old But Gold, where all I do is go back and look at games that are over a decade old, that I used to play back in the day. And meanwhile, a game could come out today, and it could be fantastic, but I don't even have the willpower to give it a go. Because it's just because I don't have that sort of nostalgic link to it, and I just assume that anything that comes out today must be shit. And it's funny when I think back, back in the day, my life was terrible in comparison to what it is now. Back then, I had to go to education 6 hours a day. I didn't want to be there. It was awful. It was unstable, moving around constantly. Right now, I'm quite stable. Everything's great. And yet, I viewed back then I was more optimistic than I was pessimistic, and now I'm more pessimistic than I was optimistic. And it's like I realise there's a certain point in our lives where we kind of lose that sense of wonder and that sense of joy from just being alive, and we kind of get all consumed by the others' perceptions of ourselves or aspirations, or you know what I mean?
Yeah, we grow up, we realize that the world is a lot more difficult and cruel than what we first thought, I guess.
Yeah. Oh, it's kind of like I'm torn between are we flawed now because we only focus on the negatives, or is it just that we were ignorant back in the day, or is it a mix of the two? I don't know, but it just got me thinking about how I remember like the back in the day, when you get a game, because that was how I entertained myself. And you'd read the box and you'd read the manual and you would install it, and it could be the biggest piece of shit ever, but you'd still somewhat enjoy it. I remember that Sonic Advance game that was absolute shit. Like, I remembered that like as a masterpiece. I went back and played it now, and it's shit. The voice acting's awful. The gameplay and the controls are shit. But back in the day, I thought that was like the best thing ever. Now, because I have that increased perception, I can I can see it for what it really is, and it kind of ruins it for me. It's like I kind of miss having that ignorance. It can't, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you mean.
It sounds like I've got some sort of conclusionary point, like there's a purpose to saying that, but there isn't. I just thought of that now, and it kind of makes me reflect and go, you can't bury your head in the sand and only focus on things that are good, right? If you're just sat in your room all day playing games or smoking crack while the world around you burns, that's just ignorant, right? That's not doing the right thing. That's just hedonism, basically. But at the same time, I think it's equally as damaging if all you ever do is focus on what's going on that's wrong and the evil in the world. I mean, you become like Alex Jones. You just get you become convinced that everything's evil, everything's a conspiracy, everyone's out to get you. You know, everyone must be evil. And the reality of the situation is, well, it's probably somewhere in between. Like, I don't like people who pretend that everything's all hunky-dory and bliss and you just need to relax, man, everything's going to be all right. Like, it won't be. It's like that quote, you know, the worst times are when good men do nothing, something like that. I butcher these quotes. But at the same time, not everything is horrendous and the sky isn't burning, and maybe sometimes it's wise to just take a moment and go, you know what? I've actually not done that bad. Things aren't as bad as I thought they would be. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense.
Do you have the same sort of feeling as I do?
Yeah, I do, but I was quite sad as a kid as well. So in a way, I kind of feel more satisfied with my life right now.
So you feel differently from me?
Yeah, but I think that depends on your issues when you were a kid and like how you grew up and stuff like that. I mean, I feel a lot more free today. I can do what I want. I mean, of course I have things holding me back, but I didn't really feel like that when I was a kid. I mean, I hated school and I know I had to go there and I was stuck there every single day. And when I came home, it wasn't that great. And now I don't have to do those things.
Yeah, but I'm the same. But I was much happier back then than I am now.
Well, I wasn't, so I can't really relate to that. But I know what you mean.
So you're happier now than you were back then?
Oh, for sure.
Jesus, you must have had an absolutely terrible upbringing then. Oh, like, for real, I don't know anyone who is happier now than they were back in the day when everything was a wonder. I mean, look.
No, but I got happier for smaller things. It's like, I remember the first time I got a Pokemon game. It was like one of the best days in my life, and it still is to this day. It was amazing. Or when I discovered WoW, or when I was like outside building a tree house or something. You got happier for smaller things, but I'm just saying overall, it wasn't just, you know, flowers and rainbows.
Yeah, but like the Squidward character, do you not kind of feel
I was not like Spongebob at all.
Yeah, but do you not kind of feel like, maybe not with us, because when I say I'm pessimistic, I'm not like a depressive pessimistic where I'm like, everything sucks, man, because I wouldn't have the willpower to even do this show, right? Because it's like, for example, how many people do you think in the next 24 hours are going to listen to this show? Fucking zero. It's literally going to be me when
Probably going to be one.
Yeah, me when I listen back to it, editing it, and that's it. And who, I don't know who will discover this in the future, if anyone. Like, we don't know. How many people have subscribed to us right now? Like 10 people. Like, I don't know.
I am.
Oh, well, yeah, I am. We're subscribed to ourselves. That's how bad it is. You know, the only people who like our stuff is us, right? But the point is that someone who is an absolute depressive pessimist, they wouldn't have the willpower to get up and go like film a show, set it up and record for like half an hour or whatever, and then go through the editing process, upload that, or do it live even. And because if no one would watch, like no one has the willpower really to start something from scratch, and yet we're still doing it. It's like, I'm not a depressive pessimist. It's just that I remember back in the day, you are kind of propagated to think like, oh, I don't know if that's even a word. Like you're given propaganda that makes you believe that you can do whatever you want. And it's only, I don't know why we tell the youth that, because the reality of the situation is this world is corrupt. It's owned, it's bought and paid for, and the reality of the situation is if you're not from a wealthy family, you're not going to get anywhere pretty much, unless you're extremely hard working. And by extremely hard working, I don't even think that's enough. You have to be extremely lucky as well, right? I mean, look, if I was like from the British royal family, if I was that prick Prince Harry, that wanker, right, and I was doing a show, I'd get views just for being like the Queen's grandson, right? That's just a fact.
You didn't even have to say anything. You could like fall asleep on the show.
Yeah, and I could still get, yeah, exactly. But because I'm some peasant from the north of England who no one knows, no one will watch. And it's like, this is the reality of the world we live in now. No one tells you that back then, and because let's face it, we like to pretend as if everyone has opportunity and everything's equal and everything's going to work out for people. But the fact of the matter is it doesn't, and people have to find this out themselves slowly. And it's a massive shock, I think, to a lot of people. And then people enter this period where they don't know how to deal with it, and they just become depressive and overly pessimistic to the point where they never end up doing anything with their lives because they can't get over it. I'm not saying we should say to people, hey, listen, oh, you have a poor family, or you only have a single mother or something, right, well, you're going to be working at Walmart for the rest of your life. Enjoy it. No, I don't think that, but I don't like how we fill people with propaganda.
But when I was a kid, I felt a bit sad because I thought the world was so complicated and I didn't understand it, and it was like a mess for me. And now I feel like I understand the world a little bit more. I mean, I realized that this is a very cruel place, but I still feel like I have a better understanding.
We sound like emos. This is like, look,
what the lie?
No, but the point I'm saying is when you're young and you think of the world, there's a lot you don't know about it, and so everything's a question. Everything's like, I mean, the amount of times I asked my mother when I was younger, like questions, it was like every 5 seconds, to the point where she got so annoyed, she just like give me a game or something to shut me up, right? Because you're endlessly curious about things. But when you find the answers out, and people don't really tell you the truth, you feel like disappointed, and I think that's a massive problem. Without people who are in the 20s now, and people who are about to be in the 20s now, like people who are 18 and 19 now, when you reach that point in your life, a lot of people you'll find go off the deep end, and they become these very sad, broken people who feel like they got a big chip on the shoulder because they feel like they've been scammed, because before then they were told that they could do whatever they wanted and they have a lot of opportunity or whatever, but the fact of the matter is they don't. But I guess that's a conclusion I've come to. I don't know what to think.
But I also think that my parents were like brutally honest with me, and I got to see some really bad parts of the world very early. It's like when we talked about Santa Claus. I never believed in Santa Claus because my mom told me that of course he's not real. It's like,
well, that's fucking bullshit if you ask me. That's rude. I mean, I would no, but that's just wrong. I feel like you never had a proper upbringing, to be honest. Like you never.
No, of course I did. Like my mom was great to me, but it's like I was also questioning a lot of things, and I think with the Santa thing, I was like, is he really real? Like, how does that work? And being skeptical, and then she's like, well, no, it's not really, you know.
No, I don't know.
That with a lot of things, just asking, well, how does that really work, and why is it like that? And I mean, it's the same, like when I grew up, my grandmother died, and then my grandfather died, and it was just a lot of shit happening at once. And I think people around me didn't really deal with it well, and I kind of picked up on that. So I realized very early that the world is just a very difficult place.
Yeah, well, that's just a bad upbringing.
Being poor,
That's just a bad upbringing. I mean, look, this obviously isn't comparable to people, but we had dogs that had died, right? And I remember when our dog died, when I was very young, and everyone was really crying and upset, and I was a bit confused because the dog, like, it was put upstairs, and I was downstairs at the time, and everyone else went upstairs, and I was downstairs, and I was kind of wondering, like, why is everyone crying? What's going on? I've never really seen people like this before. And they sat me down and I was like, where's the dog? I want to go and pet it or whatever. And they explained to me, like, the dog has, like, gone to the dog heaven, right? He's left us or something, right? They didn't just say he's dead, like, and I feel like that's what yours are doing.
Yeah, they were brutally honest. It's like, my grandmother, yeah, she has cancer, she's going to die. You'll never see her again. I mean, she didn't really phrase it like that, but I understood that. She was like, oh yeah, she's off with God in heaven. Do you see what I mean? It wasn't like that.
But I think that's contributed a lot to how you are now. I'm going to sound like a psychologist here. Oh, okay. No, I don't mean it like that. But what I mean is, you are not an optimistic person in any way, shape or form. And you have very, very, very low self-worth. Like, for example, right? People have different ways of dealing with the fact that if you're poor, you're fucked, basically, right? Like, if you're poor in this world, you can't get what you want. Now, the way I deal with it was, like, a lot of people, they deal with it, as I've said, depressingly, where they just kind of become this nihilistic person who's just depressed all the time, right? The way I deal with it is I get angry. I'm like, well, no, fuck you, Prince Harry, you little twat, for getting millions of pounds just for breathing oxygen. Meanwhile, I'm sat here having to build a wall brick by brick by myself. But fuck you. I'm angry at you, and I'm going to take out my rage on you bourgeoisie idiots, and I'm going to get what I deserve to get. But I feel like if you had something like your upbringing, you would have no desire, or not no desire for better, because that's just not human, but you would kind of feel accepting of a bad situation, like an antidepressant effect. Does that make sense?
Not really. I mean, when it comes to poverty, I see it like, I am poor. That is my fault. That is what I truly believe. I believe it's my fault that I am poor right now. It wasn't my fault that I grew up poor, but it is my fault right now that I am poor.
Well, what do you expect? Do you expect to be a millionaire by the time you're in your mid-20s?
I could have if I made better choices.
That's very unlikely, though, isn't it?
I know it's unlikely, but I believe that I could have.
Let me reverse that logic. So Prince Harry, is it his fault that he's rich? Like, should we clap for him that he's a millionaire?
No, I've never said that.
But you got to listen. If it's poor people's fault that they're poor when they're in the mid-20s, is it all? I'm not saying Prince Harry's in his mid-20s. I don't know what the hell he is. But is it, if someone's rich in the mid-20s, just because they've inherited their dad's platinum credit card, do they also deserve it?
I mean, in a way, yeah. Why wouldn't they? I mean, it's just
because they've not done anything.
Listen to me. It's a shitty system. I don't like that. I think one of the biggest issues in the world today is that so few people have so much power, and the majority of people have no power whatsoever. I mean, look at North Korea and Turkmenistan that we were looking at. I mean, that is ridiculous. And I think it is ridiculous that Prince Harry has grown up in a castle and had everything given to him. But I also think that everybody has the ability to make a better life for themselves. That's what I'm saying. I don't think I could be a billionaire. Probably not, if I wasn't very lucky. But I know that I have my limitations that I've just put on myself. I mean, I could be in a much better situation today if I made better choices. So I believe everybody has that ability, you don't have, just because you grew up in poverty doesn't mean you have to be in poverty all your life. No, look,
I get it. Right, I don't like both ends of that argument. I don't like the end of the argument where it's like, well, I grew up poor, I'm going to die poor, I accept it, I'm going to be depressed for the rest of my life, and I'm going to start, exactly, then you're a Squidward, then I'm going to start doing, I might as well just snort coke and die, right? Like, I don't like that, clearly, because I'm not like that, right? But at the same time, I don't like people who are just like, if you're poor, that's your fault, fuck you. It's like, is it my fault? Like to say that to some guy in Zimbabwe, right? Is it his fault that he's working for $2 an hour? No, he's from fucking Zimbabwe, right?
But that's different, Alex. I'm just saying. I mean, if you are poor and you grew up in the countries we do, we have so much more opportunity than what somebody who grows up in another country has. Like, somebody in North Korea that grew up poor, they're always going to be poor, always. But we don't have to have it like that. We don't need to be poor like when we grow up, because we have so much more opportunity.
Yeah, but it's still rigged. Let's not pretend. It's just rigged to a lesser extent.
Of course it's rigged, but what I'm saying is it's less rigged. If you work really hard, you can become rich, you can have a good life, even if you grew up poor in a first world country.
That's the point I'm trying to make here. It's that the balance, right? When you realise this fact, don't become this depressive, prick. But at the same time, don't be like this really bitter prick. You've got to kind of be like in the middle where you're bitter a little bit, right? You're like, fuck the bourgeoisie, you know what I'm trying to say? But at the same time, you're not, you're doing something. You're doing something with your life. You're not just wasting it and accepting that the game's rigged, right? The game might be rigged, right? But you can still win it, you know what I'm trying to say here? But I think a lot of people don't realise that, and they just kind of sign their life away to nihilism and not doing anything, and hedonism, where it's just like basic, quick instant gratification, like crap games, or I don't know, food. A lot of people lose themselves in food, and they just become these cretins rather than, everyone has something they're good at, right? I don't want to sound like some sort of, teacher or something like that, but it is true. I mean, I've seen people who are in terrible situations, and you find out they have this skill, and it's like, why didn't you run with that? Like, they're amazing singers, or they're amazing actors, or they're really good at manufacturing, or so, like something they're really good at something, but they never did it, and you're just scratching your head like, why are you a drunk, or what? Like, what is wrong with you? Does that kind of make sense? It's like I don't even know what the topic of this, or the question here. Or like what this show can even be named. I just saw that, and it made me go on like this long philosophical mental road where I'm like, gosh, I really do see things a lot more pessimistically. Like, what is I guess it's like, what is the balance? Like, if you don't have a good life, or you're not happy in life, what is the balance? Should you be pessimistic? Should you be optimistic? Should you be both? And I guess you've kind of got to be both. You can't be a Spongebob. You can't be a Squidward. You've got to be both at the same time.
Yeah, you have to be realistic. You can't survive for long if you go through life being as naive as Spongebob. Because our life is not as good as a Bikini Bottom or whatever it is.
I think I'm a bit more of a Spongebob and you're a bit more of a Squidward.
I think the opposite.
You think you're more of a Spongebob and I'm more of a Squidward?
Yeah, I just have a depressing sounding voice.
Well, let me put it this way, right? Like this show we were saying earlier, I know 100% no one's going to listen to this show at least for at least for a month. Like, no one will discover this at least for a month, because no one finds our stuff, because YouTube algorithms are all against us, and etc. etc. And yet, I know for a fact, like without any doubt, that these shows have value, and if someone discovered them, they would enjoy listening to them, and I enjoy making them. But they're worth making, even though right now there's no instant gratification and there's no payoff at all. And I think if you were a Squidward, you'd never bother doing that. But if you're a SpongeBob, you kind of would do that. But I think if it was you, and you liked radio, and it was like you liked, talking in front of a microphone or whatever, right? I don't think you would bother starting this. I think you'd go, how the fuck can I compete against... I saw earlier, right, that... what's that? Her name's escaped my mind. That American politician, AOC. She. I saw her, right? I saw like a news thing. When you're scrolling by, like on the internet, and you see like news. I saw a news thing that she had been on Twitch, right, and topped 400,000 viewers live at once, right? And I'm just thinking to myself, this bitch is lucky. She's not talented. She was a bartender who's an actor who got picked up by the Democratic Party and pushed forward, and that's the only reason why they're getting all of this. I feel like most people who I feel like most people would look at that and go, unless you're taken in by the establishment or you're lucky, what's even the point? But I'm not like that. But I think you are like that.
No, I am not like that. I mean, you can look at a lot of my life choices, and they're not like that, because if I was like that, I would be working a minimum wage job, just like being an actual Squidward. else I'm here in a foreign country with you doing some crazy stuff, like different stuff every month. And we're just winging it. So yeah, I don't think I'm a Squidward.
Alright, maybe not. But point is, people who are like this, I think, if I had to pick between being a Squidward or a Spongebob, I'd be a Spongebob, because at least then you get to enjoy your life and you might actually do something.
You might have a shorter life because you're so naive, but at least you'll have a happy one.
I don't like having a... I don't know. God, this is like a really philosophical thing. My head's exploding here. Point is, to anyone listening to this, if you're one of the sorts of people who is like, you know, you feel hard done by and shit, and you feel like fuck the world and you're angry or whatever, like, it is probably true that you've been messed over, like you're hard done by in some way or whatever, right? But you've got to take that, roll with it, and just try your best. Because at the end of the day, I sound like a Facebook motivational quote here, but you've only got one life, so you might as well try your best and do what you can with it.
I don't believe you only got one life.
Well, you got one life in this dimension, right? Before you enter the DMT dimension, right? But you know, so you might as well roll with it. Don't let these establishment pricks, the wealthy, the bourgeoisie, you know, the privileged... I sound like a left-winger. I sound like a Marxist now. But these people put you down and just make you feel like you know your place, stay in it. Fuck you. Give them the biggest middle finger ever and go, fuck you.
Yeah, and there's also something so very impressive and... something more encouraging to the normal person to see somebody go from nothing to actually making it. You know, as a difference from somebody who's just born in a palace.
Yeah, like people like Prince Harry. We're really like using him as an example here, but he is like the best example ever. Yeah. This guy, I think he's a prick.
Yeah, he had all odds, you know, to win and to do something great, but yet he is a little bit of a loser.
He still managed to fuck up. Imagine you're in the most powerful and most well-known family in the world, and you still end up a loser. You've had all the cards against you, and you still end up a loser. What a failure. Meanwhile, you're right what you say. If there's someone who comes from nothing and they become something, I value their opinion 5 million times more. Look.
You know what it's like? It's like playing a game on the easiest mode. That's like the Prince Harry. And if he completes it and he has like a lot of good things, it's not impressive. Who cares? I mean, he had done the easiest. But then being poor, it's like playing it on the most difficult level where you die, you actually die. You don't respawn. So yeah,
someone who does that,
there, then I mean that's really impressive.
Yeah. It's kind of like, I know he's a prick and I don't like him, but that Duncan guy on Dragon's Den. We watched this show called Dragon's Den. It's kind of like, you know, you have a business idea, you go in front of what's called the Dragons, which are like 5 people, and they're very rich and they want to invest money. So you'll go there, pitch your business, you'll say, I want 10% for like, I don't know, 500,000 or whatever. And if they like it, they'll negotiate with you, and then, you know, you'll leave with a deal. You know, you go there for investments. I think, like I say, I think it's called Shark Tank in America. And we always do research after the shows into the dragons and what they are, like who they are. And there's one called Duncan, and I was gobsmacked to find out that this guy, wasn't he like a criminal? Wasn't he?
Yeah, I think he spent some time in prison, or I might be wrong, but he had like a felony. He
shoved someone off a boat or something. Like he came from like
really, really poor.
Yeah, to my knowledge, he grew up really poor in Scotland. You know, he was in like the army or something. He threw someone off a boat, right, and got punished for it. And then he became a businessman, and now he's like a billionaire. And I look at that guy and go, well, you know, no one can look at him and go, you've had it easy, you bourgeoisie. Like, no, that's a guy who, even though I find him a prick, as a person, I think he's a prick, I like him because it's literally a rags to riches story.
Yeah, and he shows if you grew up poor, he shows you that anyone can do it. It doesn't matter if you grew up poor. You have the odds against you, and it's gonna be a lot more difficult, but you can do it still.
I think the biggest point is, even if you are poor, and even if you try, and even if you fail, like you just, and this sounds like something like the mum would say, right? But just for trying, you're already doing better than 99% of the people who don't bother trying. And at least you fucking tried to do something with your life, rather than just sitting away, rotting away, like, I don't know, watching fucking anime and drinking beer. Sounds like a rap. Like, but, you know, I can't quite describe it or put it elegantly, but there you go. Anyway, I asked a question, but...
What
did I ask?
You asked, what is a problem that you have as an adult that you never expected to have when you were younger?
All right, go ahead.
Alien Corm said, the fact that meeting new people is so difficult. When you're a kid and up through high school, you're constantly surrounded by new people every semester at least. Now, after I've graduated from college, it feels impossible. The virus certainly isn't helping.
Yeah, it's kind of like when you're in education, you all know why you're there, right? You don't need to explain yourself. You know, it's like, you know, you're there because the same reason everyone else is there, because you're kind of forced to be there, even though none of you really want to. But after when you got the freedom and you kind of do go where you want or whatever, it kind of feels like, I don't know if this is the right way to put it, but you kind of have to explain yourself in a way, and there kind of has to be a reason for you to meet other people. Does that make sense?
I think it's because of the internet many times as well. And I know that before, like when our grandparents were young, you could just go up to someone and start a conversation, and your social life was like, I don't know, at a pub or some outdoor activity. But now, if you were just to go up to somebody at the street, they would just think you were an absolute creep.
That's a sad reflection on the state of the world today. It's like that story we heard where that guy, there was a guy who was like 40 and a lady who was like 20 who worked at the same company, a corporation, obviously. I can't remember exactly what happened, but the guy talked to the lady and he was only asking her like an innocent question.
Okay, or something.
Yeah, like the lady looked sad, and the guy went up and said, "Are you okay? Are you all right?" So like nothing weird, just a basic like human empathy. Like, oh, she looks sad. Are you okay? Right? And it's like, and the woman looked at him and said, "Yeah," and then walked away. And the guy just thought, okay. An hour later or something, he's called into human resources and told that he needs to stop harassing the woman or something. It's like all he said was, "Are you okay?" It's like this would never happen pre-internet. This is how retarded we are these days at communicating to people. It's like,
it was another story. There was a man. I think it was from like Am I the Asshole, and he said that he was outside walking on the streets, and he saw this really beautiful woman, and he just said, "How you doing?" He said, "How you doing?" He didn't comment on her looks or anything, and everyone and she said something like "fuck you." Like, she was really rude to him. And everyone in the comments on Am I the Asshole said that, "Oh yeah, you're such a sexist pig and you are the asshole."
Imagine being called that.
He said that he asked her how you're doing because he thought she was beautiful. I mean, how are you supposed to interact with people? He asked, "How are you doing?" Like, how is that an issue? I don't know.
The internet has made us socially retarded, and it's made us dumb. We're scared of social interaction, and it's a pity of our time. Yeah, I remember the days. I'm gonna sound like an old granny here, but I remember the days pre-smartphone, and it is the smartphone that has done this. It wasn't the internet actually; it was the smartphone, because that's when people. And I really am going to sound like a granny, but that's when people became glued to their devices, communicated primarily over text, and text is the most inhumane way to communicate ever, because most of human communication is done via tone and done via expression, and text has none of them. It's literally the cold burr, boom, like what you're saying. It's like if you listen to this imagine listening to this, or maybe not really listening, but watching this in text alone. So put captions, subtitles on, right? Mute us, and just read what we're saying. How shit this show would be, like without the tone, without the voice, is unbelievable.
Yeah, that makes me think about something that happened when I was in college. I had 2 friends that I was with a lot, and then another girl started hanging with one of my other friends, and they had a lot of fun together, and obviously lots of things in common. And then they started texting. And this girl, she started being with us less and less. And eventually she didn't talk to this other friend of mine. And we asked her, like, what's wrong? And she's like, "Oh yeah, she's angry at me." And then it turns out, because my friend didn't do smiley faces in the messages, and she was very to the point, she thought she was angry with her. She didn't want to hang out with her anymore. So that's like a friendship completely ruined because of text.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy.
It's crazy.
And there's a lot of times where you're in your home country of Sweden, and I'm still here in the UK, and whenever I text you, you always say, "Why are you being so rude to me?" or whatever. And you say that I sound angry and evil. Yeah, and meanwhile, when we talk, you're just like, "What the hell?"
Yeah, but here, you can call me like what? Like, "Shut up," or
"Shut up,
you idiot," or something.
"You idiot."
But when you say that in text, it just sounds like you were actually, you know, really upset with me and calling me names.
Yeah, you know, it's a terrible way to communicate. And I think if that's your primary means of communication, which it is for most people who use the internet, it's not a good one, and you kind of become a bit socially inept in some way. Bottom line is that, how many times do I fucking say bottom line is? I don't know what to make of all of that. I just saw that video, and it just got me thinking. And I'm hoping that anyone listens to this would kind of look at their own life situation and reflect. And if you're too depressive, try and be a bit more optimistic, but in an angry fashion. Does that make sense? You can be optimistic in an angry fashion. Don't be this hippie that's like, that takes everything, like looks into everything too much and tries to make a big deal out of everything that's like really, everything's so cool, right? Like, no, life isn't like that. But at the same time, it's not shit. It's like you've got to understand the potential you have to leave a mark on this world. Take it with both hands and just roll with it and try your best. And even if you fail, if you come from a humble circumstances, no one's going to laugh at you anyway. And if they do, they don't understand the effort you've been through, I guess.